Good evening, this is James Exum coming to you from my studio in South Austin, Texas. Today is August the 16th. It's a Sunday evening at approximately 10:15 in the going into the night. Tonight I will read to you instead of having my narrator on my word program read to you. I will read to you the text of my latest discourse. It's a serious subject, and I want to give emphasis to particular phrases and words within the context of the message, so I will read it personally. My voice is a bit weak because of my Parkinsonian problems, but I'm going to give it a try anyway, and here we go. It's entitled "The Human Factor in the Equation of War." By myself, copyrighted August 2026, all rights reserved. When I start on paper, when you read these discourses, as opposed to hearing them in videos on YouTube, you don't realize that I put a little paragraph, a little quote between the title and the body of the text. And these are either excerpts or original thoughts that I italicize in quotations and add to the text as sort of a lead-in thought. And this one says, "This is the human factor. We may win battles and still lose something greater. For if victory leaves behind generations of hatred, trauma, and ruin, then what kind of victory is that?" One of my original quotations. Now getting into the text itself, here we go. Here is the real story, a plain spoken discourse on Gaza, Iran, and the costs carried by ordinary people. When we talk about war in America, we often talk about it like it is a math problem. We count missiles, troops, ships, drones, dollars, barrels of oil, and the miles of territory. We ask, who has the better weapons, who controls the air, who owns the map, and who can hold out the longest. Those things matter, but they are not the whole question. The missing number, the one that changes everything, is the human factor. They are not the whole equation. The missing number, the one that changes everything, is the human factor. The human factor is the mother trying to get clean water for her children in Gaza. It is the Iranian father standing in the streets after a strike, looking at what used to be his neighborhood. It is the Israeli family running toward a shelter when sirens sound. It is the American service member far from home, following orders while knowing that every decision may carry consequences for people whose names he shall never learn. War may be planned in secure rooms by governments, generals, and analysts, but it lands in kitchens, schools, hospitals, markets, and living rooms. This is why the present war involving Iran and the ongoing conflict in the Gaza Strip cannot be understood only through politics, religion, strategy, or national security. Those are real forces, but they are not the full story. If we leave out the ordinary person, the civilian, the citizen, the child, the medic, the hostage family, the displaced grandma or grandmother, the younger soldier, the taxpayer, the shop owner, the grieving parent, we are not seeing war clearly. We're only seeing the machinery and missing the people caught inside of it. From a distance, war can look clean. A map on television shows arrows, borders, colored zones, and military objectives. A spokesman uses words like operation, target, response, and retaliation. A commentator talks about deterrence, escalation, and leverage, but from the ground, war is not clean at all. From the ground, war is fire, smoke, hunger, fear, confusion, and the wailing of voices. In Gaza, families have lived through displacement, shortages, broken infrastructure, and constant uncertainty. Reports from humanitarian organizations describe limited access to water, food, medical care, sanitation, and safe shelter. In Iran, widening strikes and retaliation have brought danger to civilian areas as well, with ordinary people paying for decisions made far above their heads. These people are not footnotes to the conflict. They are the conflict's main human reality. For the average American family, this may seem far away. Tehran, Gaza City, Rafah, Khan Yunis, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv are not places most Americans know by neighborhood or street or even by name, yet the human experience is not foreign. Every American understands the fear of a child being put in danger. Every parent understands the panic of a hospital without enough medicine. Every worker understands what it means when prices rise, when fuel costs climb, when uncertainty shakes the economy, or when young people are called upon to take on the burden of national policy, including fighting against their fellow humans they do not know, their fellow humans that they do not know nor hate. The point is not that at all. The point is that not all sides are the same, or that history does not matter, or that threats should be ignored. The point is that no nation should become so focused on winning the argument that it forgets the people who must live under the consequences. War may begin with speeches, warnings, and firepower, but it continues through the suffering of human beings. The surviving folks of the Gaza Strip are busy people. They too are trying to pay mortgages and rent, buy groceries, get kids to school, keep businesses open, handle medical problems, and plan for a future that already feels exhausting and uncertain. So when another war fills their news, many people quietly turn away, not because they do not care, but because their world can feel too heavy to care already. That distance is understandable, but it is also dangerous. Distance can make human beings look like statistics. It can make a destroyed apartment building look like collateral damage. It can make a hungry child look like a humanitarian concern. It can make a neighborhood without power or water feel like a pressure point. The language of war can become so polished that it hides the blood underneath. America cannot afford that kind of moral distance. We are not spectators in a sealed stadium. Our tax dollars, alliances, military commitments, and energy markets, diplomatic choices, and political dates are tied to what happens in the Middle East. A war in Iran could touch American families through fuel prices, inflation, military deployments, regional instability, and the risk of a wider conflict. The war in Gaza touches American communities through grief, protest, faith, identity, conscience, and disagreements around dinner tables, campuses, churches, mosques, synagogues, and city halls. The human factor asks us to slow down before we choose a slogan. It asks us to see that every headline contains people who woke up that morning wanting what we want: safety, bread, sleep, dignity, work, family, and a reason to believe tomorrow will come. That does not solve the conflict, but it changes the way we talk about it. It moves us from cheering destruction to demanding wisdom. It is easy to speak about armies as if they are machines. We say, Israel struck, Iran fired, the United States responded, or Hamas attacked, but behind every command are people. Behind every command are people. I have a little bug that's getting on my computer and my keyboard, and because of my eye problems already, it's causing me a little discernment or concernment. Okay. Behind every command are people. Some are leaders with powers, some are militants are soldiers carrying out orders. Some are young, afraid, angry, convinced, confused, or hardened by what they have seen. Some enter the fight believing they are defending their people and wind up dead instead. Some may be trapped by ideology, fear, loyalty, or duty. Excuse me. Recognizing the humanity of the soldiers does not excuse unlawful action. It does not erase responsibility for atrocities, attacks on civilians, hostage taking, collective punishment, or reckless decision or other war crimes. Accountability matters, but if we pretend that people who fight are not human, if we make it easier to keep sending more of them into the fire, we also forget the invisible wounds that return home with those who survive. For those who survive, many American families understand this personally. We have veterans who still carry Iraq and Afghanistan. We have veterans who still carry wounds from Iraq and Afghanistan and as far back as Korea in their bodies and minds. We have parents who watch sons and daughters deploy. We have communities where military service is not an abstract idea, but a family tradition. Those families know that war does not end when the shooting stops. It follows people home in nightmares, missing limbs, broken marriages, moral injustice, and silence. That should not make us, that should make us careful. A serious nation can defend itself and still hate the necessity of war. A serious citizen can support security and still ask hard questions about civilian protection strategy, proportionality, humanitarian access, and the end goal of the game. But it is no game. War is no game. Gaza is the name of the next section. The conflict in Gaza has become one of the clearest examples of what happens when civilian life is crushed between military objectives, political failures, and hardened narratives. For Israelis, the trauma of attacks, hostages and rockets, and the fear of annihilation is real. For Palestinians in Gaza, the trauma of bombardment, siege conditions, displacement, hunger, grief, and destroyed neighborhoods everywhere is real. The tragedy is that each people can point to real pain, and yet the pain on one side is too often used to dismiss the pain of the other side. The numbers given give the moral question a hard edge. In the opening attacks October 7th, 2023, about 1,200 people were killed in Israel, most of them civilians, and roughly 250 people were taken hostage. Early reporting during the first day listed hundreds dead and more than 1,500 injured, but Israel later revised the death total from about 1,400 to roughly 1,200 as identification work continued. Those first days shocked Israel because the losses were immediate, personal, and concentrated. Families murdered in homes, civilians killed at a music festival, soldiers and first responders killed near the border, and hostages held and carried into Gaza. Gaza's losses must be understood on a different scale of time and destruction. According to UN report, the city Gaza health authorities said that more than 72,000 Palestinians have been reported killed and more than 170,000 injured since October the 23rd by April of 2026, including more than 38,000 women and girls. Other compiled casualty reporting has placed Gaza deaths at above 72,000 by 2026, with children counted in the tens of thousands and with many more bodies believed to remain under the rubble. Even where exact figures are disputed or updated, the pattern is unmistakable. Israel suffered a devastating mass casualty attack at the beginning of the war, while Gaza has suffered a long, grinding accumulation of death, injury, displacement, hunger, and physical ruin. The comparison is not meant to turn grief into a scoreboard. It is meant to show how the human factor changes when a single day of horror becomes years of devastation. In Israel, the open days of the war produced a national wound, about 1,200 dead, thousands injured, and hostages taken. In Gaza, the war to date has produced a social collapse, tens of thousands dead, well over 100,000 injured, families repeatedly displaced, medical systems overwhelmed, and entire cities and neighborhoods reduced to rubble. UN satellite assessments reported in August of 2026 that 82% of Gaza's structures, around 200,000 buildings, imagine that, were damaged, with roughly two-thirds destroyed, and that more than 60 million tons of debris has been generated, some by bombs, some by Israeli bulldozers, clearing the land since October of 2023. That contrast should humble any honest observer. The first days of the war showed how vulnerable Israeli civilians could be to surprise attack. Hostages taking rockets and massacre. The months and years that followed showed how vulnerable Palestinian civilians in Gaza could be to bombardment, siege conditions, displacement, lack of water, hunger, disease, and the collapse of shelter and public services. If we only name one suffering and ignore the other, we're not telling the truth. If we name both, we begin to see war as human beings actually experiencing the horror of it, not as a clean argument, but as one tragedy answering another until whole societies are left carrying the weight, the crushing weight. For the general American public, it is tempting to pick one side and stop listening. For the human factor demands more from us, but the human factor demands more than that from us. It demands that we reject the killing of civilians, no matter who does it. It demands that we reject hatred against the Jews, against the Muslims, against Arabs, Persians, Christians, or any other people because of who and what they are and their faith. It demands that we refuse to turn grief into permission for cruelty. Gaza is not just a battlefield, it is a place where children need water, mothers need medicine for those children, fathers need work, students need schooling, and families need shelter. If the world only sees tunnels, militants, borders, and strategies, it will miss the larger human catastrophe and turn a blind eye to war crimes committed on a pinned-up populace. People cannot live on talking points. They need food. They need security. They need law and order. They need a future. At the same time, Israeli civilians cannot be expected to live under permanent threat. No country can ignore attacks on its people. But the most difficult moral question in war is not whether people have a right to live in safety. They do. The question is whether the pursuit of safety destroys so much civilian life that it creates a deeper insecurity for everyone. Now we're shifting to the heading of Iran. The war involving Iran raises a different but connected concern, the danger of a wider fire. Iran is not only a country on a map, it is a nation of families, workers, students, believers, skeptics, shopkeepers, doctors, poets, engineers, farmers, historians, philosophers, and their children. Many Americans may strongly oppose the Iranian regime and its actions, but opposing a government should never require indifference toward the people living under that government, whether chosen by them or not. When bombs fall on infrastructure, the damage does not stop at the target listed. Hospitals lose power, water systems fail, medicine becomes harder to get, parents flee with children and possessions in a few bags, Fear changes the rhythm of everyday life. A war that begins in the language of national security quickly becomes a test of whether leaders can still see the civilians standing near the supposed targets. For Americans, Iran also brings practical consequences close to home. The Middle East remains tied to global energy markets, shipping routes, inflation, and military commitments. A wider regional war can raise prices at the pump, strain supply lines, and increase the chance that Americans' personal will would be placed in harm's way. The human factor, including the family in Texas filling up a truck, the small business owner watching shipments costs rise, the military spouse waiting for a deployment notice. But the deeper issue is moral, not just economic. America has always wrestled with the tension between power and principles. We have strength, alliances, and influence. The question is whether we use the strength with enough humility to remember that every action has a human echo. The answer cannot be isolated from the world, but it also cannot be endlessly escalated without a clear path towards peace. Now we shift to the human factor. The human factor does not give us an easy answer. It does not reduce conflicts to soft feelings or naive wishes. It simply insists that policy without humanity becomes dangerous. Security without conscience becomes cruelty. Sympathy without truth becomes propaganda. Anger without restraint becomes destruction. For the American public, this means asking better questions, not only who is winning, but what is being destroyed. Not only who struck first, but who is suffering now. Not only who does our side say, what does our side say, but what facts are being left out. Not only how do we defeat an enemy, but what kind of future follows that defeat. It also means guarding our own public conversation. In times of war, language can become a weapon. People begin speaking of whole populations as if they are guilty by birth. They mock suffering when it belongs to the other side. They treat civilian deaths as acceptable if it hurts the right enemy. That is how society loses its moral center. Once we stop recognizing the humanity of others, we become easier to manipulate and harder to bring back to our senses. The American tradition at its best does not require us to be weak. It requires us to be decent while strong. It calls us to defend innocent life, tell the truth, protect religious freedom, resist hatred, support our laws and their laws, and demand accountability. In the context of Iran and Gaza, that means caring about hostages and civilians, Israelis and Palestinians, Iranians and Americans, soldiers and refugees, grief and responsibility. All of these things matter. All of these things are important. In conclusion, war is sometimes presented as a contest of strength, but it is also a test of memory. Do we remember that the people under the bombs are people? Do we remember that a soldier is someone's child? Do we remember that a child in Gaza, a family in Israel, a worker in Iran, and a service member from America, that we all belong to the same human family, even when politics divides us? The human factor in the equation of war is not a sentimental extra. It is the very thing that tells us whether our policies are still connected to moral reality. Without it, war becomes arithmetic without conscience. With it, we may still face hard choices, but we face them with clearer eyes. As Americans, we do not have to pretend these conflicts are simple. They are not. But we can insist that human life remain at the center of the conversation. We can demand that leaders think beyond the next strike and towards the next generation. We can refuse to let fear make us cruel or distant, make us indifferent to suffering and human sorrow. In the end, the measure of a nation is not only how powerful it can respond to danger, but how faithfully it can hold on to its humanity while wielding the sword of war. And there we have it. I'm sorry about all the interruptions. These little ants, or whatever these things are crawling around here, they seem to be attracted to electricity. And when I turn the lights down, like I have in the background, and all this electricity is going on in my desk, they just come running like it's a electronic picnic, for lack of a better phrase. But there it is. You know, some narrators on the internet do daily shows and multi-daily shows. They'll have a puppy dog barking in the background. Well, you can't blame the puppy dog. It wants to be with its master, and you can't blame the ants. They're attracted to electricity, it seems, just like bees are to honey. So that's neither here nor there. The point of the treaty, the point of the talk, was that war is a horrible thing, and we must not allow ourselves to be caught up into the indifference of worrying and caring about our fellow human beings. We must keep war, humanity, as a factor in the process of war, in the outcome of war, in the danger and the liability of war. Thank you so much for putting up with all of that about my voice. You know, Parkinson's can be a very cruel thing. It's affecting of course, my voice is my voice also is 75 years old, and a record that's 75 years old, or a speaker on an old phonograph that's 75 years old, is going to be a little scratchy, and it's going to bounce around in the grooves of that record every once in a while, and miss a word, or skip a sentence, or skip a melody, a bit of a melody. And that's sort of what my voice is like. That's why I allowed my computer to speak for me, so to speak, on most of my narratives. Well, thank you again for coming. Please take what I just read to you as a very serious discourse. There's no laughter within the parentheses of those written words. The laughter can come afterwards or before, but not during that. I had to read it to you personally. I could not allow my machine to read it to you, because the machine could not catch the nuances of what I wrote and the feelings that were going through me and consuming me and sometimes overwhelming me when I was writing putting that pen to page, so to speak. Well, as always, be good to yourself, be good to others, and remember, though the dark clouds come and the rain falls next month, maybe the seeds lying in that flower bed will sprout, and we'll have a beautiful fall season with fresh autumn flowers. Good night to you, and thank you so much. Oh, if you get a chance, spread the word about my channels, and also tell your friends and neighbors. Hopefully there's something in my messages for everyone. Good night.